Good morning, Carly
Morning.
Thomas with CBC News. This morning, President Trump posted on Iran saying, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." What's your message to Trump, and do you believe this rhetoric?
The first is that Canada expects all parties in this conflict, in any conflict, to respect international laws, the rules of engagement, and that means not targeting certainly civilians or civilian infrastructure. And we urge all parties in this war to follow those responsibilities. It's a point we've made publicly and privately. There is I'll just observe that there are some negotiations going on, and that there is often a gap between what's said publicly and what's happening privately.
Carney is walking an incredibly dangerous tightrope here, desperately trying to condemn Trump's apocalyptic rhetoric without directly triggering the volatile former U.S. president. By mentioning a gap between what's said publicly and what's happening privately, he is heavily hinting that secret backroom deals are happening right now to stop a full-scale Middle Eastern war. But while the terrifying threat of global conflict looms large, a massive diplomatic chess game is playing out with another controversial world leader.
You even praised Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Australia. It's good to see that the leaders' chemistries are working well and they're working in synergy. But how does strengthening Canada-India benefit Canadians? And do you have any idea when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be coming to Canada?
Well, thank you for your question, and thank you for attending both of those important events, the G7, and I'll just make a comment on that first, which is one of the important things, Canada's perspective for the G7 was to widen out our engagement in the G7. So, of course, Prime Minister Modi was there, President Zelensky was there, as was President Lula and others, President Lula of Brazil. We recognize the world as it is and broadening out. Second is that our relations with India, Canada's relations with India have evolved. It's one of respect, one of engagement, and one of deepening commercial ties.
Notice how carefully the Prime Minister frames the relationship with Narendra Modi, shifting the focus entirely away from recent geopolitical friction and strictly toward commercial ties and trade. He is completely dodging the underlying controversies, signaling that the government is desperate to secure a lucrative free trade deal, even if it means ignoring massive diplomatic tensions. Foreign relations might be a delicate dance, but back home, the Prime Minister is being backed into a corner over a terrifying domestic reality.
Global news. Prime Minister, last year one of your cabinet ministers lost their seat here in Brampton. All the other Liberal MPs who won did so by somewhat narrow margins. You now have 3 of 5 Brampton MPs in your ministry, including the first ever Secretary of State for combating crime. How did your party's reputation on crime and law and order issues contribute to your party's election results?
Well, I think let me answer it with the way that our cabinet, our caucus, and myself approach these issues, which is there are serious issues with respect to crime in Brampton, in the Peel region, in other parts of the country. And that is why we have been, from the moment that we came into government, a little less than a year ago, following the election, we have done multiple things to address those problems. First, more RCMP, 1,000 more RCMP, bringing them on 1,000 more border agents, CBSA agents.
The reporter just exposed the ultimate political vulnerability. The ruling party is bleeding support because everyday citizens feel incredibly unsafe in their own neighborhoods. Carney's rapid-fire, defensive listing of tough-on-crime policies proves the administration is in full panic mode, desperate to rewrite the narrative before voters completely turn against them. And if violent crime wasn't enough to sink their poll numbers, a brewing financial scandal involving a top cabinet minister just took center stage.
Can I say in English? Okay. Well, the first thing to say is that whatever minister, hopefully, they will have a partner, and that partner will have a job, they'll have a career, And it's important that we have a system that those individuals can continue to pursue their career. And we do have a system. There are rules, there are regulations, and the Minister of Finance has followed those rules and regulations in notification of the Ethics Commissioner, in recusing himself from dealings with respect to Alto. And I'll just finish by observing that this is a good situation, because we have a partner who can pursue her career, the Minister of Finance who can do his responsibilities. We have lots of other ministers who can take on their responsibilities. And we have a project that's going to contribute more than $35 billion to our economy and create more than 50,000 jobs.
This is an absolute masterclass in political damage control, with Carney rushing to shield his finance minister over a massive conflict of interest regarding a $35 billion high-speed rail megaproject. By framing the issue as a defense of a partner pursuing her career, he is deploying a brilliant but highly manipulative PR shield to distract from the massive corporate money changing hands behind the scenes. Yet, while billions are being handed out to elite megaprojects, average citizens are being crushed by an economic reality the government refuses to fix.
She's in the aviation industry, and she asks, well, I don't know why, because of a war in Iran, which is not our war, our gas prices are skyrocketing. Don't we have so much gas and oil, and yet I am almost paying $2 at the pump? Why is this happening? So what is your answer to the everyday Canadians on that matter?
Yes, sure. Well, this is an important question, a fundamental question, a question people ask themselves every day, or they deal with the consequences every day, every time they go to the pump, or if they use home heating oil, or they're buying an airline ticket. She's in the aviation industry, buying an airline ticket, they're seeing the cost go up. And I mean, the short answer is because there's a global market, and those countries that have lots of oil and gas see their prices go up alongside with those who don't have that oil and gas.
This is the exact moment the political elite completely disconnect from the working class, offering a cold academic answer to a burning emotional problem. Carney's excuse that absurdly high gas prices are just a global market issue is a massive slap in the face to citizens living in an energy-rich nation, proving the government has absolutely no immediate plan to stop the bleeding at the pumps. These rapid-fire moments expose a government fighting fires on all fronts. But what is the ultimate endgame behind this massive infrastructure push and the political theater surrounding it? What we just witnessed in this press conference is the absolute pinnacle of modern political theater, a masterclass in how governments attempt to use massive financial announcements to paper over deep, structural, and existential crises. On the surface, this event was supposed to be a triumphant victory lap for Prime Minister Mark Carney and his cabinet. The script was perfectly written. Stand in front of a community center in Brampton, announce a staggering $51 billion Build Communities Strong Fund. Talk about local heroes who made it to the World Cup, and project an image of a government that is literally building the future. It was supposed to be about swimming pools, hockey rinks, high-speed rail, and creating union jobs. But the second the scripted remarks ended and the journalists took the microphone, the entire facade crumbled, revealing a government that is desperately fighting a multi-front war for its own political survival. To truly understand what is happening here, we have to look at the psychology of the megaproject. Politicians love concrete. They love steel. They love ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Why? Because infrastructure is the ultimate political magic trick. When a government's poll numbers are tanking due to abstract or unsolvable problems like global inflation, rising crime rates, or international wars, they pivot to something you can touch. A $51 billion infrastructure fund isn't just about building hospitals and transit lines. It is a massive, federally funded PR campaign designed to buy patience from an exhausted electorate. Carney spent the first 20 minutes of this event painting a utopian vision of the future. He talked about eliminating the GST on new homes, cutting development charges, and creating 42,000 high-paying careers. He was selling hope. He was trying to convince the public that if they just look at the shiny new recreation center, they might forget about the crushing realities of their daily lives. But the media wasn't buying the diversion, and the questions they asked completely hijacked the narrative, exposing the terrifying geopolitical tightrope the administration is currently walking. The very first question out of the gate wasn't about community centers. It was about the potential for World War III. A reporter confronted Carney with a horrifying social media post from Donald Trump, threatening to wipe an entire civilization off the map in Iran. Suddenly, the prime minister of a middle-power nation was forced to respond to the apocalyptic rhetoric of a chaotic global superpower. Carney's response was a fascinating study in diplomatic survival. He couldn't aggressively attack Trump because Trump might soon hold the keys to the White House again, and alienating him could destroy the national economy. But he also couldn't stay silent because his own political base demands a strong stance on human rights and international law. So, Carney deployed the ultimate diplomatic smokescreen, vaguely urging all parties to respect the rules of engagement while dropping a massive hint that secret, back-channel negotiations are happening behind the scenes. It was a stark reminder that no matter how many swimming pools the government builds in Brampton, their entire agenda can be derailed by a single tweet from a foreign leader. This geopolitical anxiety bled seamlessly into the next major controversy, the relationship with India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The reporter pointed out the stark contrast in how the government handles different international actors. While Carney was quick to condemn state-sponsored terrorism in the Middle East, he was incredibly evasive when it came to India. We all know the explosive allegations and diplomatic nightmares that have plagued the Canada-India relationship recently. Yet, in this press conference, Carney completely sanitized the relationship. He framed it entirely around deepening commercial ties, artificial intelligence cooperation, and a looming free trade agreement. This is the brutal, cynical reality of global geopolitics. Morality is a luxury, economics is a necessity. The government is signaling that they are willing to sweep massive controversies under the rug if it means opening up a market of over 1 billion people to domestic exporters. It is a calculated, cold-blooded gamble, prioritizing economic survival over diplomatic purity. But while the Prime Minister was dodging international landmines, the domestic questions proved to be even more lethal. The exchange regarding crime in Brampton and the surrounding regions was perhaps the most revealing moment of the entire hour. A reporter bluntly pointed out that the ruling party is losing seats because voters are terrified. Internal polling shows that 55% of the country feels crime is on the rise. You cannot govern a country that feels unsafe. It is the ultimate political death sentence. Carney's reaction was incredibly telling. He didn't offer a philosophical defense. He immediately rattled off a defensive checklist of authoritarian-leaning measures. 1,000 more RCMP officers, tougher bail conditions, longer sentences, and border security crackdowns. For a government that traditionally campaigns on progressive social values, this hard-right pivot on law and order shows just how deeply panicked they are by their internal polling data. They know that if they lose the suburbs over the issue of violent crime, they lose the entire country. And then came the scandal. It wouldn't be a political press conference without a massive conflict of interest bubbling to the surface. The issue of the finance minister's partner being tied to the Alto High-Speed Rail Consortium, a project receiving billions in government backing, is the exact kind of corporatist nightmare that makes average citizens despise the political elite. Carney's defense was a masterstroke of political spin. Instead of addressing the massive ethical black hole of a finance minister overseeing a $35 billion project tied to his own family, Carney weaponized identity politics. He framed the issue as a defense of a woman's right to pursue her career, essentially daring the media to attack a working professional. It was a brilliant, highly cynical deflection. He quickly pivoted back to the promise of 50,000 jobs, hoping the sheer size of the economic benefit would blind the public to the blatant cronyism happening in plain sight. It is the classic elite bargain. We will give you jobs and trains, but you must not look too closely at who is getting rich off the contracts. But the ultimate breaking point, the moment where the grand illusion of the press conference completely shattered, was the question about gas prices. A reporter relayed a story from an everyday citizen, an aviation worker, asking a brutally simple question. We live in a country rich with oil and gas, so why am I paying $2 at the pump while a war rages halfway across the world? This is the question that decides elections. It is the raw, visceral anger of the working class. And Carney's answer was an absolute disaster. By coldly explaining the mechanics of the global market and stating that countries with oil see their prices go up just like countries without it, he sounded like a university economics professor lecturing a starving person on the intricacies of supply chains. It was a catastrophic failure of empathy. When people are choosing between heating their homes and feeding their children, they don't want a lecture on macroeconomics. They want a leader who will fight for them. Carney's inability to offer any immediate relief, merely promising to cushion the blow at some undetermined point in the future, perfectly encapsulated the fatal flaw of this administration. When you step back and look at this entire event, the narrative is crystal clear. We are watching a government that is trying to build a $51 billion fortress of infrastructure to protect itself from a tidal wave of global chaos and domestic fury. They believe that if they just pour enough concrete, cut enough ribbons, and promise enough jobs, the public will forgive the skyrocketing cost of living, the fear of crime in the streets, and the terrifying instability of the global order. But as this press conference proved, the cracks in the foundation are already showing. You can build the most beautiful community center in the world, but if the citizens are too terrified of crime to walk to it, too broke from gas prices to drive to it, and too cynical about government corruption to believe in it, then it is nothing more than an empty monument to a failing political strategy. The Prime Minister is playing a high-stakes game of distraction, but the questions are getting harder, the public is getting angrier, and the clock is rapidly running out.